Okay, it's time for another update on the 3D printed Enigma machine. I've made a little bit of progress. I've basically figured out how to build and have printed the lamp board, which is this piece here. I've also made a few modifications to the keyboard because I found the plastic wasn't rigid enough, so it was sagging in the middle. What I've ended up doing is adding some extra supports in the middle here, which did mean reprinting the whole keyboard, which was quite a long print, but that prevents this piece from sagging downwards. That turned out to be reasonably necessary. If I remove the keyboard part, what you can see here is the lamp board. This is made up of multiple parts. The little switches, I can find one. Basically, I'm using these little lamp sockets, and the base plate here has a whole lot of rectangular holes to hold these little sockets in place. They just sort of clip in like that. And then there is another plate that fits over the top of that somewhere. If I can find it. So this is the bottom plate with all of the little lamp holders, and then there's another plate that goes over the top, sort of sandwiched in with a hole, and that sits on top of that, and that's what clamps it all together. Then the bulbs go in. Because the original Enigma machine used quite flat, quite short little bulbs, I'm actually using quite tall bulbs. So I ended up having to print these sort of light shrouds, so I didn't get light spilling out and lighting up other letters. The way this works is, at the moment nothing's bolted down, of course, it's all just sort of sitting there, but this top piece can come off. So what that reveals is all the little light bulbs, and these are just sort of a push in, so these just sort of clip into place. The actual lamp board itself, as I say, I had to print it with these tubes to shroud the light bulbs so the light doesn't come through. This piece has to come off, of course, because once the machine's all assembled, you need to be able to pull this off in case you have to change a light bulb. So what I've done is, it might be a bit tricky to see, but these side pieces are printed with little sort of bumps on them, and the end pieces of the lamp board has these holes, and this is sort of a sliding fit down. And so what happens is you just push it down into place, the sides sort of spring apart slightly, and the little bumps fit into those holes and lock everything into place. So that holds it securely, but you can still remove this when you need to. The lettering is sandwiched between two layers in there. What I actually ended up using was my printed onto clear acetate the letters, and then I ended up using a piece of tracing paper behind it just as a diffuser. I did try printing the letters directly onto the tracing paper, but that didn't work as well. Well, one thing I found is when I printed it, it actually ended up slightly smaller, and I think it's something to do with the material and the way it's fed through the single sheet feeder. And so this is actually squashed up a little bit, so the letters didn't line up. So even with the one printed on acetate, it's actually slightly smaller. You can see the letters are slightly off, but that's good enough for now, and I'll go through and fix that later maybe. So if we clip that back into place, this is a complete unit, of course. What will happen is eventually I'm going to have an aluminium base plate for the whole thing, and it'll get screwed in and be attached via these standoffs. You can see on the bottom there all the contacts, so I'm going to have to, of course, wire all these up. There's 26 obviously, but there'll only be 27 wires coming off here because one side of all the bulbs is going to be common. So I'll just stop this and I'll set this up on my little workbench so that we can see one of the bulbs light up. Okay, so I've got this set up. I've got it hooked to my power supply, just so I can light up one of the bulbs. I'm still deciding what voltage I actually want to run this at. So these are actually 12 volt bulbs, so I can go up to 12 volts, but I think they'll be too bright. So what I've been experimenting with is 7.2 volts, and I'm thinking of powering the whole thing off just a small battery pack like that, just using AA nickel metal hydride cells. 6 of those will give me 7.2 volts. So I've got the power supply hooked up here. If we have a look at this. So at the moment I'm just lighting up the one letter. It's not overly bright, but it's bright enough to tell that it's lit. So I think that's probably going to be good enough. And it means the bulbs are underrated, so they should last a hell of a lot longer. And they also won't get hot. So I'll probably go with 6 volts, 7.2 volts, that kind of thing. As you can see, because of the shrouds, only one letter lights up, which works quite well. That's also interesting. I'm not sure if that's going to come through on the camera, but the black PLA, when you light it from behind, it actually lights up a very deep red. It's quite a nice colour. It's sort of very, very deep red colour. I don't know that the camera will pick that up, but it's quite interesting. Just hook it onto one of the others. So with that working, I still need to make the board for the patch connectors for the plug board, but that's basically just a simple flat piece with holes for all the sockets. It'll need a bit of strengthening because, of course, when you're inserting and pulling out the sockets, there's going to be a bit of force on things. And one of the problems I'm finding with printing this whole machine is that plastic just isn't very rigid. So you can see even on something like this, it's, there's quite a bit of flex to it, quite a bit of bend. So as I found when printing the sides of the rotor mechanisms, I had to really stiffen everything up, put a lot of strengthening beams into it, just to make everything strong enough. Obviously the lamp board's not a big deal because it doesn't get any force on it. But the plug board, of course, you're going to be plugging in and out cables, so I'm going to have to make that fairly strong and rigid. But I'm pretty pleased with that. That's come out fairly well. The printer you can hear in the background is just reprinting these side pieces, because at the moment it's quite hard to get that to clip in and out. It's not too bad. It's a little bit of force. Probably what I'll do is when everything is mounted in the wooden box, I'll have little finger cutouts underneath here, so you can get underneath it and actually pop it out. But what I'm doing is reprinting these pieces where the little bumps aren't as high, so it should make it a little bit easier to plug it in and out. And one thing I've actually discovered on my printer, if I move the camera we might be able to see it. When I was printing this piece, I had an awful lot of problem with stringing between the little tubes. Stringing is when you get sort of fine bits of plastic that sort of melt across between pieces. And I've played around a bit to try and get rid of that. I've got some retraction on the printer, but I'm just playing now with Z-Hop, which I've never used before. And what that does is, you can see here, and you can hear it, the printer, as it's moving, as it changes position, it retracts the filament a bit, which is why you can see the filament there moving. But the Z-hop is, as well as retracting the filament, it also lifts the extruder up very slightly. I think I've got it set to 0.2 at the moment. And so you can see here, if you look at the Z lead screw, that it's twitching a bit. And that's it lifting the head up between moves. And I'm hoping that's going to help with the stringing problems I've been having. And if we look at this, you can see there's still a little bit of stringing in the middle there between the two parts. But it's definitely not as bad as it used to be. So I'm going to go with that and see how well that works. One other little additional point. I've been trying to figure out how to make this bar, which they call the Compensator in the plans for some reason. I've been trying to figure out how to make that sprung loaded so it comes back up. For now, I've just got a little spring underneath there. So as you press the key, it just pushes the bar back up. The problem with this is that there's nothing really holding that spring, and they keep doing what springs tend to do, and they just end up flying around the room. I've lost quite a number of them up the vacuum cleaner. So I've been trying to think of a better way to do it. On the original machine, they actually have springs pulling this up rather than pushing. So what I'm thinking of doing is, if we put the lamp board back in place, and it goes about there, and we have a look around here, I may end up printing a piece that sort of fits in here on these legs with a little bolt through it going through here, and then what I can do is put a bar underneath this and have a spring between the two, so that as this comes down it gets pulled back up. I think that may be a nice way to do it, and the only problem is I really need a way of doing it so that when this is all in a box you can get to everything. But because I'm going to be mounting everything onto a base plate, I think what I'll do is I'll make the base plate one single piece and the box will be completely separate, and the whole thing gets assembled onto the base plate, and then that gets dropped down into the box as one piece. So you can lift this whole thing away, and then you get access to the sides and the back of everything, so you can get to the insides of everything as you need to. So I think that's probably what I'll end up doing.